When you visit a web page, that web page can write data to a file on your computer, and that's known as a cookie. Scripts on that web page can also read data from your cookie file to understand where you have been in the past. All of this data about you is getting shared between advertising companies like Google, Facebook, and AppNexus. Ghostery is a browser extension that allows you to limit what you share with these online tracking companies. Larry Furr develops products at Ghostery, and on this episode he takes us through the process of how we are tracked on the internet. We also explore the topic of ad fraud, which is going to be a theme that we will continue to explore on Software Engineering Daily. If you have any information on ad fraud or if you have recommendations for guests, please email me at jeff@softwareengineeringdaily.com. And I hope you enjoy this episode. This episode of Software Engineering Daily is sponsored by Braintree Payments. Mobile app development can be complex, but integrating your payments no longer has to be complex. With Braintree, your business can accept nearly every type of payment from any device with just one integration. Learn more at braintreepayments.com/sedaily. Braintree's API supports Android, iOS, JavaScript, and many other languages. The documentation for Braintree is clear and elegant, and if you're integrating payments into your app for the first time, you can call Braintree's customer service and get assistance with your integration. Don't get frustrated when you're trying to integrate payments and monetization into your app. Go to braintreepayments.com/sedaily and monetize your app today. braintreepayments.com/sedaily. Now let's get on with this episode of Software Engineering Daily. Thanks for listening. Larry Furr is the Vice President of Product at Ghostery. Larry, welcome to Software Engineering Daily.
Hey, great to be here, Jeff. Thanks.
So let's say I go to a popular media site on the internet, Fox.com or Huffington Post or some other popular blog or website. What are some of the ways that I will be tracked on that website?
Well, there's a number of different ways that you may be tracked, and as we often tell our customers in our community is that different trackers do different things. They're not all created equal. Some of them are there simply to try and make the user experience better. So they might be doing A/B testing to provide different experiences for a customer and see which ones test better or provide a better experience. Others may be around analytics and understanding site visitors and what they're doing, what they're clicking on, where they're headed. Others may be widgets like real-time comments, as an example, like a discussion type thread. And then others are there to target ads and provide ads that are based on your interest or your cookie profile. So there's a variety of different trackers that get used on websites.
What? So for listeners who don't know, you're not you don't have a background in software engineering, but you have a background in product development. From where you stand, what exactly is a tag doing? What is a cookie, or are those different things?
Sure. Yeah, they are different things. Yeah, a tag or a tracker. We use the two words kind of interchangeably at Ghostery, but it's essentially a JavaScript tag there on the page. So it's something that's been inserted into the HTML body of the page, and it's firing at a certain time as that page loads to do a certain thing. So in some cases, as I mentioned earlier, it's firing to open up a button that allows you to click it and say on Facebook that you liked that particular article you just read, or tweet the article link to your Twitter feed. So there are JavaScript tags that do that on a page. And as I mentioned earlier, and these are the ones that a lot of people are typically most interested in, are the JavaScript tags that are there to communicate with an ad server so that it can serve up an ad that is more tailored towards your interests. And the way that that is determined is usually by looking at something called a cookie or a set of cookies, as we refer to a cookie profile, that is there on your actual computer or your machine. And so what happens is as you visit different pages, cookies get dropped, and these aren't cookies that you eat. These are really just little text files that are dropped onto your into a system folder on your computer, and they have information about where you went, what you clicked on, what you did, and those cookies can start to help advertisers understand what are the things that you're interested in. So if perhaps they see that you've been looking at a lot of travel sites, and they can from that deduce that you are looking to go to Hawaii on a vacation, and so you might start seeing ads about vacation packages to Hawaii as an example. So that's one example of how cookies get used to provide targeted ads to you when you go to websites.
So cookies are a file on my computer where a bunch of text is stored about the places I've visited, and the tags on a website are the ways that the tags on a website allow the website to communicate with that cookie file and understand what's going on inside of it, perhaps write to it.
That's correct. Yeah, the tag on the website is going to be able to communicate information from the cookies back to an ad server, and in some cases actually profile you, and so actually start to build a profile of who you are back on the ad server. And that's kind of the ultimate goal of advertisers, is because they want to be able to say, look, based on all the cookie information that we have, we know who this person is. We know this is their computer, or this is their iPhone, or this is their tablet. We have an idea of what they like to do. We might even have an idea of some demographics on who you are, and that information now starts to get served on up from the ad server itself. So that in this case, the JavaScript tag is really just saying, hey, we know who this person is already, and based on knowing who that person is, what's the best ad for me to show them?
When I am going through a session on this web page like Fox or Huffington Post, how much of my behavior is being tracked and shared? Just how much of it are they able to write to the cookie file or gather from my interaction with the website?
Well, unless you've opted out of that sort of tracking, or online behavioral advertising, as it's called, they can really track whatever they want with regards to how you've interacted with that website and what you've done, what articles you've read, what you've looked at, and so forth. And that can be cross-referenced again against other cookies that are there on your machine to know other places that you've been. So it's not necessarily just what they know about you from what you've done on that site, but also other places you've been, your browsing history as an example of where you've been on the internet.
Are they tracking my mouse hovering around or my gyroscope information on mobile?
It all depends. Like with mobile, it depends on how much information is exposed via the APIs that are available to software developers for apps and so forth on that. I mean, there has been a tendency for those to get more and more locked down, but there is quite a bit of information that is available from mobile devices, as an example, and as well as desktop devices. Your IP address, as an example, can tell somebody where you're located at from a geography standpoint.
What's going on in the back end of these different tracking companies when I visit a page? So I go to a page and it's got all these trackers on it. They're interfacing with my cookies. They're leaving information in my cookies. They're taking information from my cookies. Can you give me more of a picture of how information is being shuttled between my browser and these different tracking companies? And who are these tracking companies?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, they're ad technology companies who are trying to help provide more targeted ads, more valuable ads that have a higher success rate of users actually clicking on them or finding value in them. I think we all would agree as users of the internet that it's annoying when you go somewhere and not only do you see ads that are disruptive to your experience, but they're not even on point. They're not about things that you care about. If the holy grail for an advertiser is to actually have very on-point ads that speak to your interests and your needs. And I think we all enjoy when that happens. And so that's the idea around all this technology that is happening behind the scenes. It's not nefarious. It's not about trying to figure out who you are and where you live so that they can track your movements and send it to the NSA. I know there's those conspiracies that are out there, but it's really about being able to provide a better click-through rate for advertisers, and that's what helps the ecosystem work. That's what keeps content free. That's how publishers make money, by providing free articles online in exchange for advertisements they show you that they hope that you'll click on because they're relevant to you. And in doing so, those advertisers get paid and the publisher continues to pay the bills. That's the theory behind all of it. And so, more directly to answer your question, yeah, there is a lot of that information that's being shared as you browse and as you go to pages, and it's all towards the goal of being able to provide more relevant advertising to users.
There are obviously ad tech trackers, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Are there also these information brokerages that maybe, I'm not sure how these businesses work exactly, but like they're not exactly ad tech companies, but there's some sort of middleman or like just information gatherer, tracker companies that may be present on one of these sites?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, the level of information of yours that gets shared with these different tracking technologies and companies that are out there is a personal decision. And I think different people feel differently about how much of that information they want shared. And it can be worrisome, as an internet user, I worry sometimes about the information that's being shared with others because there are bad actors out there. We know of security breaches and logins that get compromised and that sort of thing. And so, as a consumer, it can be worrisome about how much of my data is on how many different servers out there that I don't know about, that I can't control. And that's why there are tools in place to help take control of that. And there are mechanisms by which you can opt out of online behavioral tracking and advertising, and to be able to have more control over that. So it's one of those things where as a consumer, there is a burden on the consumer to do some research and be informed and educated on this, and to exercise the rights that you do have, and to, if you're so inclined, use tools that allow you to have more control over how your information is shared online.
Absolutely. And one of those tools is Ghostery, which we will get into, which is a tool for limiting the amount of data that can be gathered by trackers if you want to opt out of a select number of trackers. Because, of course, there are some trackers that you probably wouldn't ever want to disable. There are ones that improve the user experience. Can you talk about that? Like, what are the examples of when I absolutely need a tracker to have a good user experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a great example is, you're on a blog or a website where there's a discussion thread, and a lot of the discussion or comments threads are actually used with JavaScript tags. And yes, there is some tracking information there because they need to know who you are and that you're not like a spam bot who's just trying to tell people about this great opportunity where you can make $1 million a year. But at the same token, if you were to be uncomfortable with that and block that tracker, you would be unable then to use that discussion thread. And that's sort of the quid pro quo, so to speak. If you want to be able to participate in that community forum, so to speak, you have to be comfortable with some level of information about who you are, so that tracker can do its job, so to speak. So that's one example. Another example, like I said, might be the social media buttons that you see in a lot of articles, where you can click a button to share it on your Twitter feed or on your Facebook profile with a single button click. These are all examples of trackers that I think most people would agree are providing a good service. They're doing something that makes the experience better for them when they go to that site. I think where there's a more polarizing effect is probably, again, on some of the cookie profiling and interest-based advertising. Some people find that to be a little creepy. Others, like my wife, think it's great. She likes it when she sees, an advertisement for a pair of shoes she's been looking for, and now she sees an ad that says they're on sale, and the advertiser knows that because they know that she's been shopping for those shoes elsewhere. So, it's all in the eye of the beholder as to whether or not that sort of tracking is a service and a positive thing, or it's something that is uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, generally, I've seen some great ads recently that have been I don't think they've resulted in a conversion quite yet, but they're getting there. I mean, I've seen enough Soylent ads that they're really trying to get me to buy Soylent, and I'm very tempted at this point. Bought it a while ago and I enjoyed it. They were trying to get me to try it again, and I'm tempted. How does tracking work within a walled garden like Facebook or Amazon. These giant websites that have so much scale, and they can, and they have credentials, so maybe they don't even need to. I mean, do they need to track you with cookies and stuff? Because they can just build their own user profile of you.
Yeah, the tracking's still happening. It's much more first-party tracking instead of third-party tracking. So it's all on Facebook's servers, as an example, instead of a third-party ad technology company's server. So yeah, exactly like you said, Facebook already knows who you are. You're logged in. They know all about you because you filled out a profile and told them all about you. And they know what kind of articles you're reading on Facebook, what sort of interest you have, and so forth. And so they can provide very targeted ads, and they actually do a pretty good job of it. I would say most of the ads I see on Facebook are relevant to me, and it's because they have so much information about you already, and they're at a great benefit for that. It's that sort of Facebook advertising experience that third-party ad techs are trying to provide when you go to other publisher sites like the Huffington Post or like the NewYorkTimes.com as an example. They want to be able to provide ads that are as relevant to you as the ones that you see on Facebook, but it's a little harder for them to do because when you go to the Huffington Post, you don't have a profile that you filled out and said, this is who I am, this is the things that I like, these are the things I don't like. And so they have to try and divine that through cookies that tell them about the things that you look at when you're on the web.
Right. And so the place where information between these different sites is exchanged is often the ad tech company. So I go to Huffington Post, I browse around and do some stuff, and an ad tech company registers that I have visited Huffington Post, and then I go and let's say I'm on Huffington Post and I'm looking at some news article about Spain, and then I'm on YouTube and I start seeing some featured videos about Spain, trying to get me to go take a vacation to Spain. And the reason that YouTube knows that is because Google has plugged into that YouTube has plugged into that advertising exchange and has registered that I have gone to Huffington Post and looked at an article about Spain.
You got it exactly right. That's how it works.
Okay. Is the browser maker able to track me? Like, can Google Chrome just get even more information and more thorough information and give that to Google, and they can build an even more fine-grained profile about me, or are there limitations to what a browser can track?
No, I mean, technically a browser could track anything it wanted to because it's loading all the pages. I don't know that most of the browsers do that. I mean, Google obviously makes Chrome, but I don't believe, to my knowledge at least, that they're trying to profile people at the browser level. They're doing that more through the search results, things you search on Google, as well as their own tags that they have for their various ad technology entities.
Can you characterize the different players in the ad tech business in more detail? I know that's a big question, but there are these ad exchanges that are exchanging information about us. They're helping ads target more specifically. There's Google and Facebook that are also in some sense ad exchanges, but they're doing slightly different roles than the just display advertising exchanges like OpenX and what's the big one? AppNexus. There's also DSPs. I think, what is that? Demand-side providers?
Demand-side platform.
Demand-side platform. There's publishers, which is like the Huffington Post. These are sites that actually publish ads, and they publish content that make the ads attractive to post there.
That's right.
I know this is a big question. Can you characterize this marketplace in a little more detail? Because it's not like a straightforward two-sided marketplace like we're used to in economics.
You're right. There's a lot of different pieces and components, and frankly, a lot of the lines are merging for a lot of these companies as they start to provide entries in the different product categories, so to speak. But at a high level, you have your demand side and your supply side. So your demand side platforms or DSPs are exactly like you said. Those are the likes of your MediaMath, your AppNexus, and so forth. And they're the ones that are really working with the brands that want to advertise. So they're the ones that are providing demand for ads. And then you have your supply side, which is your DoubleClick for publishers, which is a Google entity, PubMatic, Rubicon, so forth. They're working more with the publishers that are supplying advertising space. And so the idea there is that if you're a publisher, you use an SSP to say, look, I have so much ad space that I can fill with ad inventory on my site. And if you're a brand who is, or an ad agency who is, in most cases representing a brand who is trying to place ads, your DSP is helping you to sell that inventory to the various publishers who are providing the supply. And so that all gets brokered and done on what are called ad exchanges, which are essentially where publishers who want to sell ad space can be coupled with brands and ad agencies who want to sell advertisement, and a match can be made, so to speak. And all of that, it happens in near real time when you go to a website based again on who you are, so that in real time the right ad can be shown to you. And so that, 10 different people can go to the same page and see 10 different ads, and it's because of all of this DSP, SSP technology that's happening behind the scenes in a matter of milliseconds, which is pretty impressive stuff. And then the ad servers are out there, and those are the things that serve up the ads. So the publisher site itself is not what has the ad inventory. That ad inventory sits on the ad creatives, as they call them, sit on the ad servers and are served up to the publisher when that JavaScript tag fires and says, give me the right ad for this particular user. So those are some of the main players, but like I said, a lot of those lines are starting to merge as these companies start to either acquire other smaller players, or they start to make their product portfolio larger so that they can be sort of a one-stop shop, so to speak.
All of these steps that need to occur for an advertising auction to take place, it's kind of astounding. So I go to a web page, and the page is deciding which ad to show me, and in the fraction of a second, the publisher is connected to, the supply side platform, which somehow links up with the demand side platform, and figures out which ad from which agency, which is representing which advertiser, to serve to me, and all of that is done before my page loads. How do they orchestrate? I mean, I understand you're not an engineer, but how the heck is that orchestrated so that it's not some crazy amount of latency?
Yeah. Well, in some cases there is some latency, and I think that's one of the things that we're not doing a good job at as far as providing a good experience.
You mean the industry as a whole?
Yes. Yeah. When I say we, I mean the industry. And so, yes, that's one of the reasons that people are using tools like Ghostery to say, look, you're not doing a good job at serving up these ads in a timely manner, and there's so much stuff happening that the page loads slowly. But there are techniques for how this gets done that you can kind of have your cake and eat it too. And of course, the ad tech providers are continuing to fine tune their technology, provide bigger and bigger, throw more hardware at it and so forth. But yes, there's a wrong way and a right way to do it, and if it's done the wrong way, you do definitely see some poor latency. And I think we've all been to those pages before that take a long time to load because there's so much stuff happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is what I find so funny about this whole ad blocker stuff is people use ad blockers because ads degrade the user experience in their current form, and that's why these sites like Forbes are suffering so much. And it's not necessarily because people don't want to see ads. People generally don't want to see ads, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're just neutral because it's just like, okay, whatever. This ad is kind of helpful. It's not really in the way. I don't really care. But so many of these sites just have ad experiences that just ruin the reading experience. And it's clear that the reading experience is there to serve the advertising experience rather than the other way around. So why don't you explain how Ghostery works? So people now they have a good picture of the advertising landscape, all these trackers that are going on. Explain what Ghostery does.
Sure. So Ghostery, first and foremost, is a tool to make the internet better, to make web experiences better for both consumers as well as site owners. So we're probably most well known for our consumer browser extension. We have 10 million some active users around the globe who use Ghostery to control how their data is shared online. So it's first and foremost a privacy tool. And by default, when you install Ghostery, nothing's blocked, but you can make decisions on a site-by-site basis or on a tracker-by-tracker basis if you want to get into the granularities of it, as to which ones you're comfortable with and which ones you're not. And our users are pretty informed. We provide a lot of information about each of the trackers. So when you go to a page, you can see which trackers are loading. You can click on any one of them to read about the company, who they are, how they're using your data, where it's going. And you can make informed decisions as to whether or not you trust that company having your information or not. Or like I said, you can make a more blanket decision and say which sites you're comfortable with sharing your information and which ones you're not, which is what most of our users tend to do. So that's what Ghostery does. And its real goal is to first and foremost be an education tool, an empowerment tool for consumers to understand how their data gets used when they go to websites, and then secondarily to be able to make decisions off that information as to what they're comfortable with and what they're not. And that's a very personal decision for each of our users that we don't make for them. We let our users make that decision for themselves. And that's really been a core goal and value of Ghostery from the very beginning is we're not taking sides. We're not telling you what's good and what's bad. We're just providing you information and letting you make those decisions for yourself. On the business side of the equation, Ghostery also provides tools for brands and site owners to both be compliant with privacy laws, as well as to provide analytics into how the use of these third-party technologies on your website can degrade the user experience and actually work against what you're trying to do as a site owner. Because at the end of the day, site owners don't create websites to aggravate users. That would not be a very good business model. But they sometimes inadvertently do exactly that because they don't have good oversight on the use of these trackers on their website, and they don't understand how it's degrading the user experience, how it's perhaps compromising privacy and security for their users, or in some cases, perhaps actually selling the information that they have about their users to a competitor. These are the things that the enterprise tools that Ghostery builds help provide site owners and give them the ability to provide a better user experience for their consumers. So we feel like at Ghostery we're really attacking the problem from both ends of the equation, both from the consumer standpoint of giving them tools to be empowered and control their user experience, as well as on the enterprise side, giving site owners tools to be able to take more responsibility and be more proactive in the web experience they're providing their users.
Life is too short to have a job that you don't enjoy. If you don't like your job, go to hired.com/sedaily. Hired makes finding a new job enjoyable, and Hired will connect you with a talent advocate that will walk you through the process of finding a better job. It's like a personal concierge for finding a job. Maybe you want more flexible hours or more money or remote work. Maybe you want to work at Facebook or Uber or Stripe or some of the other top companies that are desperately looking for engineers on Hired. You deserve a job that you enjoy because you're someone who spends their spare time listening to a software engineering podcast. Clearly, you're passionate about software, so it's definitely possible to find a job that you enjoy. Check out hired.com/sedaily to get a special offer for Software Engineering Daily listeners. A $1,000 signing bonus from Hired when you find that great job that gives you respect and salary that you deserve as a great engineer. I love Hired because it puts more power in the hands of engineers. Go to hired.com/sedaily to get advantage of that special offer. And thanks to Hired for being a continued longtime sponsor of Software Engineering Daily. I like Ghostery a lot because when I look at the company, I see an incentive structure that makes a lot of sense and is not really predatory on anyone. But in contrast, there are a lot of companies and I kind of want to get into this. There are a lot of companies that, whether or not they're engaged in malfeasance on purpose, they are engaged in some bad behavior, or they're involved in types of bad behavior that make them money, perhaps indirectly sometimes. The ad tech industry has evolved to be a place where incentives are often not to do the right thing. It's almost like the banking business. Do you think that's accurate?
Well, I mean, I think there are some bad actors out there, as I said earlier, and we definitely see people that have business models that at Ghostery we just don't feel good about, so that we don't participate in. And to your point, yeah, we do try very hard at Ghostery to have a business model which we feel is acceptable to everybody. We're not trying to take sides. We're not trying to kill the ecosystem. We're actually trying to make the ecosystem better. And we have a business model that's very transparent. And there are some players out there who are not as transparent with their business model, and maybe claim to be in service of the consumer, but in reality, they're not. And that's something that we feel strongly at Ghostery about, making sure that we're very transparent and upfront about how we do business and how we make money.
Let's talk about that. What are some of the ways that the advertising business, the online tracking business, what are some of the ways that they undercut the best interests of the consumer or the end user, or perhaps the advertiser, the company that's trying to spread their brand online through advertising? What are the ways that this ecosystem, with all these middlemen, DSPs, SSPs, ad tech companies, tracking companies, what are some of the ways that the end user or the advertiser get bilked?
Well, I think one of the most common things we're seeing out there right now is ad fraud. And what that essentially is some bad actors that are creating technology to essentially mimic real users going to sites and seeing ads, because the ad world is all about impressions, which is how many thousands of people have seen this ad, and that's how publishers get paid, and that's what advertisers are paying for, is the number of impressions that ad has been able to make. And so, as you might imagine, in the case of ad fraud, where impressions are being counted not for actual living, breathing humans that saw the ad, but for some sort of bot or program that's been created to mimic users, loading up web pages. Well, that doesn't really serve anybody. That ends up causing publishers to essentially overstate the numbers of people that were seeing those ads, and advertisers are now paying for impressions they never got, and no one really is served by that, because now the ecosystem has fraud in it. And again, it's the same ecosystem that keeps content free for all of us users that want to be able to continue to have a free internet.
Indeed. So some of the problematic situations are a publisher, like a blog that has ads on it, may pay some sketchy service somewhere for traffic, quote unquote, an increase in traffic. And they don't know where that increase in traffic is coming from, but the increase in traffic comes, chances are it is from bots somewhere. And those bots end up seeing advertisements. And then in some circumstances, you could even have a horrible situation where perhaps there's an ad tech company somewhere. The ad tech company is selling ads to certain sites, and then it turns out, the ad tech company is selling ads to sites that they own, and they're also buying bot traffic on those sites. There's a lot of problematic situations that could develop. And at the core of it is the question, can we differentiate bot traffic from human traffic? Do you think we can?
Oh, there's technology out there that does it now. Google is probably one of the largest, if not the largest investor in that technology, because of course they they gained a benefit by being able to ferret out and stamp out ad fraud. And so yeah, there's a lot of technology that's being employed and developed every day to solve the problem of ad fraud. It's a bit of a cat and mouse game, but I think the technology will continue to advance, and hopefully it's something that if it doesn't completely get obliterated, at least gets brought into check over time.
How transparent is Google about how good they are at catching fraudsters?
Well, I don't know. I'm probably not the right person to answer that question. I mean, there's a number of articles that talk about this. Google is of course, in very much in the ad tech business. That's their main source of income, and so I would imagine that it's something that they're working very hard to make better. And where there are issues, they may not want to be as forthright with how bad the issues are, but it's no secret. Everyone knows that ad fraud is out there. Anytime you go to an ad tech conference, it's one of the key things that people are talking about. It's an industry-wide concern, and like I said, there are a lot of smart people that are working on it, and Google in many cases is leading that charge.
Do the brands that are advertising into this ecosystem, like Procter and Gamble or Kraft, do they know how much fraud there is in the ecosystem?
Well, I think like many of us, they're trying to make that decision based off of the information that they have, and it's not always a perfect system with regards to measurement. I just saw an article the other day where I think you mentioned Procter and Gamble themselves were disappointed to find that the ad impressions that they were getting on Facebook were not as good as advertised. Now, this isn't a case of ad fraud, but it's just a matter of an incorrect measurement by Facebook of how effective their ads were being with regards to showing relevant advertising to their users, and so one of the great promises of Facebook and some of these first-party platforms is that they can provide very relevant ads that have higher success rates, and of course that's why a lot of brands have been flocking to the likes of Facebook and others to advertise. But of course, when the accuracy of those measurements is called into question, that can give brands reason to pause and rethink that strategy and question whether or not they're getting the value for their buck that they were told they were. So there is a lack, I think, a general lack of understanding and visibility around a lot of the measurements around the effectiveness of ads, and it's another one of those areas where the industry and the ecosystem is trying to get better, because at the end of the day, people don't want to pay for what they're not getting, and I think anyone would feel that way.
That event where Facebook recently disclosed that they had been measuring views on videos in an incorrect way, that was pretty worrisome. They disclosed that their numbers on the numbers that they had publicized about how many views videos on Facebook were getting were off, and they were correcting them. It was nice to see a disclosure. It's always nice to see a disclosure, but God, it worries me about the ecosystem that these numbers are hard to get right, even on the first party platforms, because you think about how many layers there are to getting this tracking right, and even on Facebook in a walled garden where they have really good ways of detecting if you're a human or not, they still have must be hundreds of millions of fake profiles, and it's just hard to get clean traffic. It's hard to get clean numbers, even if you can identify the clean traffic. But the ecosystem ticks on.
And it does, yeah. And more money gets spent every year on digital advertising, and that's because companies believe that it's working. Companies typically don't throw money at things that are not providing results. And so, despite all the warts and so forth, the ad tech ecosystem continues to provide value to its customers, and I think the problems continue to be worked on. And I guess I'm an optimist, but I believe in technology, and I believe technology can solve all problems, and I think it gets better all the time.
Now, in the 2008 crisis, we saw that humanity has the potential to dramatically misprice things as a crowd, as a big crowd. The advertising ecosystem is obviously much bigger in scale than the securitized mortgage industry, but it does make you wonder. Clearly we had this massive herd mentality of mispricing in a situation where people were kind of just copying each other in the ecosystem. Is there any chance that we're doing that with online advertising, where perhaps these ads that we're purchasing are just not worth it and they're dramatically overpriced and the fraud is not getting priced in effectively? Is there any chance of that?
There is some chance of that, and I think that's why we're seeing some of the evolving nature of the ad tech industry over the years to help hedge against that concern. And I think the other thing we're seeing happen is a lot of there's some consolidation in the ad tech space. So there's several larger companies that are emerging, smaller companies that are getting rolled up into the larger companies. And as that happens, I think we're seeing more of the inefficiencies worked out of the system, and seeing it work better and at a higher profit margin, so to speak, for all that are involved. So, but yes, I think you ask a good question. It's one that many people, probably much smarter and more informed than I am, have speculated on. And there's people on both sides of the issue. I guess what I look at personally is the fact that, like I said, digital advertising continues to grow year over year. And I think businesses technically, generally don't spend money on things that they don't feel like are being working for them.
Yeah, it's just the reason I brought up the 2008 crisis is we had many years of people buying securitized mortgages that
Sure.
turned out not to be worth very much.
That is true. That is true.
So, okay, Facebook and Google, do they have incentive to police fraud as much as they possibly can? Or are their incentives more aligned with, we'll police enough to be convincing? Or is that too conspiratorial?
That's probably a little conspiratorial. I mean, again, these guys are very incented to make sure that the business they're running is as unblemished as possible, and so I have faith that they are doing everything they can to do exactly that and to get that stuff under control.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly hope so. And look, I am as much a fan of Facebook and Google as you possibly could be, I think. But it's just like you see this absolute power corrupting absolutely, certainly in the banking industry, time and time again. And oh man, the online advertising industry seems even more opaque and even harder to police than the banking industry.
There's definitely some opaqueness there, and again, I think that's where we see the technology getting better all the time to help make that more transparent. Because advertisers, publishers, everyone who's part of this wants to have transparency, and consumers do as well. Ghostery, again, we attack the transparency from the consumer side and from the site owner side. But there are a lot of ad techs and companies out there that are trying to provide more transparency for advertisers and publishers as well.
Did you see the other story about The Guardian purchasing its own traffic and finding that it's just like the middlemen in between them purchasing their own traffic on their site? So basically they purchased ads on their own site, like they pretended that they were. So The Guardian is a publisher. They purchased traffic on their site as if they were an advertiser, like as if they were a Procter and Gamble, and they found that something like $40 of their $100 in advertising spend actually translated to ads being paid for on their website. Did you see that article?
I didn't. No.
Oh, okay.
That sounds interesting, though.
Yeah, it was quite interesting. So do you think as time goes on, like these layers of middlemen will get consolidated? I guess that's what you're saying. You're saying they'll get consolidated. It'll get more efficient. There will be more dollars spent where they should be.
Yeah, I think as there's some consolidation, there's more the data is sitting with one company versus it being pieced together from 10 different technologies, and so some of those inefficiencies get worked out. And as you work out inefficiencies, of course, you can improve the value for per dollar. Um, by the same token, it's kind of funny because we see consolidation, but then we also continue to see a number of new technologies, more so on the marketing side, that are springing up all the time. So we're seeing some consolidation on the ad tech side, but we're actually seeing a lot of sprawl on the marketing tech side, which is a different topic, obviously, than ad tech, but it's one that is of interest to Ghostery, again, because on the enterprise side, we provide tools that allow site owners to be able to take inventory of all the different third-party technology that's on their site, which is much more than just ad technology. We talk a lot about ad technology. That gets a lot of the coverage. It's sort of the sexy topic that all of the publications want to talk about. But the marketing technology is also something that's a big piece of the puzzle with regards to web experience.
So what are you talking about in terms of marketing technology? What does that mean?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there. There's all your analytics. There's your your various tools that people use, your DMPs, your TMSs. These are all tools that marketers are using in a large part in the same way that advertisers try to profile people and provide good ads. But if you're a marketer, it's more about providing a funnel of leads for your salespeople, and so they're using a lot of similar technology to be able to provide better, more targeted experiences for their site visitors. And to be able to fill that funnel with qualified leads that they can go and do business with. And so advertising is one aspect of that, but it's not the only aspect. It's oftentimes, like I said, the ad tech world gets a lot of publication and a lot of publicity, but the marketing technology out there, just like ad technology, if left unchecked, can really start to degrade the experience of your site visitors.
Yeah, and one thing that I think is interesting about this whole ecosystem, and this gets back to tracking more generally, is that so you take a website like Huffington Post or New York Times, and these websites don't feel very personalized. The advertisements certainly feel personalized, but when I go to the NewYorkTimes.com, I still see just like front page of a bunch of articles that I don't care about, and yet the ads are so targeted towards me. Why can't the New York Times integrate all this? If I'm going to be tracked throughout the internet, like why can't it just provide me utility on the content? Why does it have to just provide me utility on the ads?
Sure. Well, and I think we see some of that happening. I mean, there are tools out there, news aggregators and so forth, that are intended to provide you content that is pertinent to your interest and so forth. And I personally believe that's where a lot of the online publication industry is going to go. That's going to be more curated news based on my taste and my interests, which will probably be great for advertisers because it will make it that much easier to provide targeted ads when you can provide targeted content.
Okay, so very interesting stuff. We should talk a little bit more about Ghostery. You've been treating me to an inside tour of the ad tech industry. Tell me more about Ghostery, how product development works there, and how you are seeing businesses using Ghostery.
So, Ghostery product development works in service of our customers. We want to provide value to them, and as I mentioned, we have both business customers as well as consumer customers. On the consumer side, we work very closely with many of our users to get their feedback on what enhancements and features they want to see added to the Ghostery browser extension. I haven't mentioned it, but we also have a Ghostery mobile browser on both iOS and Android that allows consumers to use the same sort of features and options that they have in the browser extension on their desktop browsers. They can use that in a mobile browser as well. And so we work closely with our community. We listen to them. We do a lot of user testing, a lot of feedback and surveying to make sure that we're building the kind of product that our users are going to love and want to use and rally around. And I think we have if you look at Ghostery on social media, you'll see that our users are big fans. They like what we do. They trust us. We've worked hard to earn that trust and to keep it by being, like I said, very transparent with what we do and how we do it. And we try to do that same thing on the business side as well with our enterprise products. So we have a number of large Fortune 500 type clients that we work closely with to bring them tools that allow them to provide a better web experience for their customers. So in particular, the product I'm referring to is called MCM, which is short for Marketing Cloud Management. And it's all about empowering site owners, whether they work on the marketing side of the house or the IT side of the house, to be able to take inventory of the third-party technologies that are on their sites, whether it's ad technology or marketing technology or any sort of third-party JavaScript tags that are deployed on their site. Our tools allow them to take inventory of what's there and to understand what it's doing. Should it be there or not? How is it affecting site performance? How is it affecting user privacy? How is it is it serving a good purpose or a bad purpose on my website? And if it's a bad purpose, let me get rid of it. And so that actually came about as a result of many of these site owners who are using the Ghostery browser extension to basically, test their own site to see, what's on my own site, because I don't actually know, and asking, can you give me an enterprise tool that is essentially the Ghostery browser extension, but for me to use on my own website, so that I can be a more responsible site owner and provide a better web experience for my visitors.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because Ghostery is part of this trend towards tools that make improving website performance easier, even if you're not a developer. So I'm sure a lot of these Fortune 500 companies, maybe not necessarily short on developers, but perhaps the person who is in charge of front-facing website, lack of tracking, I don't know, may not have a lot of development experience. But anyway, I think you gave a better overview than I can. Well, Larry, thanks for coming on the show. Is there anything else you'd like to add about Ghostery?
Just that if you want to learn more, you can, of course, visit our website at ghostery.com or follow us on Twitter or Facebook. And it was great to be here today, and I hope that your listeners have learned a little bit about how the ecosystem works, and would encourage you to go download the Ghostery browser extension if you're not already using it. And if you're a site owner, check us out online, and we'd love to tell you about what's happening on your website and how it might be working against you.
Okay, well, that's great. Larry, thanks for coming on Software Engineering Daily.
You betcha. Thanks.
Thanks to Symfano for sponsoring Software Engineering Daily. Symfano is a custom engineering shop where senior engineers tackle big tech challenges while learning from each other. Check it out at symfano.com/sedaily. That's SYMPHONO.com/sedaily. Thanks again, Symfano.